Welcome to another episode of RMLD's Current Insights. I'm your host, Greg Phipps, at least for a few moments. I'm joined by our executive producer, Julie. Julie and I have been doing several of these, and we hope it's of value to you, our customers, to learn more about us at RMLD and how we do our best to take care of you with providing reliable, low-cost, non-carbon energy to your home, to your business. But we're going to do something different here. Julie and I are going to swap seats. Well, we're going to swap seats digitally. So, Julie, I'm going to put you in the driver's seat, and I'm going to be the answer man. Go ahead, Julie.
All right. Thank you, Greg. As our listeners know, we typically have outside guests, but today I thought it would be fun to interview Greg, our fearless leader. So I will have you as the interviewee, and I will be asking you the questions.
I'm in the hot seat.
Yes, you are. If you're ready to go, let's get started.
Let's do it.
All right. So we typically start off asking our guests about their background. So can you tell us about your background and your journey in the utility industry and what brought you to be the general manager at RMLD?
RMLD, interesting path. So a lot of experience in my background. Trained as an electrical engineer, but really a business guy that applies engineering experiences. I tend to get involved in industries that are undergoing dramatic change, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes about the electric industry, or specifically the energy industry that's undergoing, as we like to call it, seismic change. But that's been my background, whether it's been in robotic systems or medical imaging systems or solar systems, which kind of materials. So I ended up kind of getting to where I am now. A couple decades ago, got into materials that we sold into the early days of solar energy, solar panels, specifically thin film panels, and then got into the customer side of the business. I tend to look at value streams, so either material side, manufacturing, or customer, supporting the customer. And so as we got further down the road, or more recently, about 10 years ago or so, really focused on energy we call it energy efficiency, but we called it energy optimization, how to help customers maximize the benefit of the energy, and ended up getting plugged into the MLP world of Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut, and got to know who RMLD was. And
MLP is Municipal Light Plant.
Oh, that's right.
Not
yep,
as common
everybody.
of an acronym to everyone.
Good reminder. Good reminder. Municipal light plants. It's so we're called public power. We don't have any shareholders. We're basically our primary focus. We are a not-for-profit that serves the customers in our local communities. And for us, is most of our customer, as the podcast audience knows now, we serve Linfield Center and North Reading, Reading, and Wilmington. So we are extremely unique among all the different, all the 41 different MLPs in Massachusetts. We're one of the two largest ones, but we are different, specifically that we serve, the majority of our load is outside of our host town, which is Reading. But I ended up getting involved in IRD, and IRD is the Integrated Resources Group, and that's the customer-facing group and also the power supply group. So kind of the beginning of the value chain, where we get power from, where we source it from as RMLD, and then how we deliver to our customers, set rates, incentives, efficiency programs, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was there was an opportunity when the former general manager came to her point of retirement. The Board of Commissioners, it was an interesting process, but I ended up taking this seat, which is fun. And it really, Julie, it's consistent with my background. I tend to get involved in industries and companies that are undergoing massive change, and we'll talk a little bit more about the massive changes that are in front of RMLD, and it is a fascinating time to be in this industry.
It is, certainly is. As someone who's also in it, you are
you
not.
Know it.
Yes, you are
You
not
know
overstating
it.
that. It is
Yeah.
exciting, with a lot of changes. So utilities, especially electric utilities, face various challenges.
Yes.
What are some of the key challenges you see for RMLD, and how are we strategizing to address them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Julie, in terms of the context. So we're not highly regulated, but we do have legislative and regulatory laws and regulations that we need to adhere to. And in 2021, a seismic one, a significant one, was put in place by the Commonwealth, the Massachusetts Senate and House, and we call it the 2021 Climate Bill. But it, for the very first, it did several key things. But it put non-carbon targets for us as MLPs to hit. Between now and 2050, intermediate steps, 50% non-carbon in 2030, 75% non-carbon in 2040, and net zero by 2050. The reason why that's important is that it's tied to the energy we sell. And so it changed the metrics that we look at. Our mission has always remained, I shouldn't say always, but pretty darn almost always, first and foremost, safety for our customers and safety for our employees. Electricity can be dangerous. It's very helpful, very useful. We use it to light, to heat, to transport, to cook, to refrigerate. I mean, it's deep into each one of our lives, but we need to keep it safe. But our core mission is reliable, always keep the lights on, low cost, be very affordable. And then the new metric that's come in place is non-carbon. So we have a metric in place for that. So that has changed how, and it's primarily Massachusetts, but Massachusetts is a leader in New England and Connecticut. All the states work very closely together. But that's been a significant change in terms of changing the direction in terms of how we think about generating power. And then the other big change really happened outside of our region, and that is liquefied natural gas, or LNG, is now able to be shipped across the Atlantic specifically, and for that matter across the Pacific. But it has basically tied the European energy market to the U.S. energy market, and specifically to New England. And as a result, that's put a lot more volatility in terms of pricings. The regulation is also driving some of the traditional generators out of the market over time. And it is encouraging more hydro, more wind, more solar in our territory. And it could drive more nuclear, but right now there are 3 nuclear reactors across 2 plants, and that's probably what's going to be in place for the next several decades. So the big challenges for us is, the generation of electricity to fulfill the non-carbon mandate from the bill, and then that bill did 2 other things. It's driving a change in transportation, so the adoption of EVs specifically, and it's also driving the change in buildings, and specifically heating and cooling, which cooling is pretty much in the way it's done today with air conditioners, but using electricity. But the big change is to heat buildings in the wintertime. And right now in our territory, about 98% of homes in our territory are heated by either natural gas or oil. And the state is increasingly putting in legislation and regulatory to drive that toward electricity, which means air source heat pumps. So the reason why that's important to us is that basically is going to double over the next 25 years the load that we have, that we as RMLD need to serve our customers. So we've come out of a flat period of no load growth, and now we're in a 2+% per year, which doesn't sound like much, but when you multiply that over 20 or 25 years, it's 2x. And then the last piece, not the last piece, but the other big piece is, because it's a much more digital world, we're using more digital systems and not just computers, but mobile devices, et cetera. But and because we are becoming a more critical part of the infrastructure, because more of the society is paying upon electricity as opposed to gas or natural gas or oil over time, we take both physical but also cybersecurity threats very, very seriously. So those are kind of the big pieces that we look at. Fascinating space. Right.
And also our existing infrastructure, getting it ready for increased electrification.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So, when we think about the infrastructure, we've designed, so we always do, electricity, there are battery systems or storage systems, but it doesn't store very well. And so you need to design the whole electric distribution system and the transmission system and the generation system so that it meets load. So when somebody turns the lights on, or a refrigerator pump comes on, or air conditioner comes on, the system automatically adjusts. And you basically always have to meet the exact load. So there's usually typically a 20 or 25% buffer that the whole system can handle your max load plus 20, 25%. But as that load increases over time. We talked a few minutes ago about it doubling. That means we have to build out our infrastructure to handle more load. And then the other piece, we might talk about here in a few minutes. We will with in-territory generation. We'll pause before I get to that topic. But from an infrastructure perspective, one of the implications that in-territory generation is going to drive is what we call a distributed generation network, but specifically our systems, our wires and transformers and reclosers and communication systems need to be bidirectional. So sometimes energy will be going, north to south or east to west, or to a building. Sometimes it might be coming from a building and going to other parts of it. So there's a bidirectional nature of the system, and then the fact that we will, it'll be highly automated so that it adapts. Basically, think of it as a microgrid. It doesn't mean anything to our customers, but a massive amount of data and digitization and handling additional load and bidirectional load. So the infrastructure, literally, we are just the distribution infrastructure. When we put something in place, it needs to be in place for 20 or 30 years. So we're building the network of the 2040s and the 2050s today.
Right. And one thing about our territory, there's not a whole lot of available land, so it's not like we have vast areas to work
correct. With. Yeah. There's not a lot of available land, and so we have to think very out of the box, creatively, to figure out how we make all this come together. We are well populated, which is good, right? We are close to the Boston area. We are geographically in a very desirable location, which is good for our customers. But it provides some challenges for us in terms of how we fit into the physical space so we can deliver.
So you mentioned the Massachusetts Climate Bill, which is obviously a major driver of our strategy. But when we look ahead to 2050 and the 100% non-carbon goal, can you just shed some light on how we're positioning ourselves to achieve that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Julie. And that, as we talked about before, that is a significant factor in terms of what impact on load, and then how we actually supply that load. And so we talked about the distribution network a little bit. It's got to handle 2x the load, bidirectional, a lot more digitization. But there are a couple other factors that come into it, and one of them is what we call in-territory generation, and I'll expand upon that in just a second. But also in-territory storage. And one of the things that the new generation technologies, and I say new, well, more mature, but solar's relatively new. Wind is, solar's been around for decades. Wind's been around for centuries. Hydro's been around for centuries in reality. But each one of those are becoming a larger part of the portfolio, and that's driven to try and use less fossil fuels, less non-carbon generating systems to generate electricity. But the interesting thing is that what's different about solar or wind or hydro is that you only generate electricity when the sun's out, or when the wind's blowing, or when the water's flowing down a river. And so there's an intermittent nature, as opposed to a nuclear plant where it's always on, or a natural gas generator where you turn it on and you run it and then you turn it off. So that intermittent nature we need to think about different ways to provide buffers. So that's where storage is still early in the viable economic model. It works. We're doing a lot of storage systems. When I say storage, battery storage systems. But that's a key piece of it. And the other element that we do is how do we encourage our customers to use their energy more optimally and more efficiently. So a good example of the efficiency was the change that was done 15 years ago, which basically, from a regulatory perspective, mandated the replacement of incandescents with more energy efficient. So first it was CFL, compact fluorescents, and then it was LEDs. And that basically moved the load for a typical home. Lighting used to be just under 30% of the energy was for lights. And so if, for those of us that remember our mom and dad say, turn the lights out.
Right.
Right? Exactly. And close the door. But turn the lights out. But LEDs are much more efficient, and so the transition to LED now, and there's really only one choice, right? When you walk into Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever store to buy your light bulbs, there's only, it's different wattages, but it's not, 3 or 4 different choices of incandescent and compact fluorescent and LED. It's now all LED. Anyways, the choice has been pretty much decided by the market, but the impact is that lighting is now 7-8%. And so when we think about efficiencies, we're trying to figure out other ways to help our customers transition to more efficient systems. Air source heat pump is an example of that. We've got a weatherization program that we're putting in place to help just not even to be more efficient, but not even use energy. And then I mentioned optimization. And optimization is really the concept of when you use energy. And so some of the things that we're exploring right now are bi-directional EV chargers, so that you can charge your car during certain periods of time, and if you decide to, your choice as a customer, but we will pay you to use the energy in your battery at other times. So there's a optimization in terms of using the infrastructure that's coming to balance out the intermittent nature of supply. Fascinating stuff.
Right. The bi-directional charging, is that something, like, how far out would you say that is?
Well, technology exists today, and so we're in the process. This year we will have installed at least one DC, what we call a DC fast charger, so a high volume charger that's bi-directional, and that's going to give us a chance to do some exploration with rates and so there's a technical side of it. The technical side of it's pretty well established. The real question now is, what's the business model, and how do you make it easy for the customers? And so that's part of the learning for right now.
Right. So you mentioned in-territory generation, which is very exciting and fascinating. So can you just tell us the role it plays in achieving sustainability and how we're looking to make that happen in our territory?
Yeah. So there's a big push right now for us to do in-territory generation, and it's a seismic change for us. I go back to that word seismic. We, as a municipal light plant, have the authority from the state to generate electricity as well as distribute electricity. We are in what they call a deregulated state, so the IOUs can either generate or transport, transmission, or do distribution. So
and in the early days, of RMLD did generate.
Well, we've had that ability to generate, since we were formed back in 1894. In fact, the original generation was to basically power streetlights, which is why it is our, Reading Municipal Light Department, keyword being light, to illuminate. And so we actually, at our current location at 230 Ash Street, there's a building in our campus called Station 1. And Station 1 used to be one of the original, it was back in the early 1900s, I believe it was 1905, roughly, plus or minus a couple of years when it actually was fully commissioned. But it was a generation plant, and there's actually the building that we currently operate for our administrative building that you or I are in. Before that building was there, it was a turnstile for a rail car that we used to drop coal. This goes back, this is in the 30s and 40s time frame, so a long time ago. But we used to be in the generation business, and we're going to be back in the generation business. And there's lots of challenges to doing that. But from your question of how does it help our sustainability, the generation that we are in the process of putting in will be either non-carbon or low carbon. And we're trying to figure out right now how we get to fully non-carbon. The state mandates that are in place for 2030, for example, we are ahead of those. We'll be making changes probably, or recommending changes to our retirement program for certificates, so that we can actually, in either this year or the next year, actually from a compliance perspective, hit the 2030 target. But so from a sustainability piece, the ability to generate in territory with the thing that you mentioned earlier about access to land, because you need land to make all this happen. It's part of the puzzle, but our goal is to hit those targets, or to be ahead of those targets, and make sure that the power's on, right? Keep the lights on, reliable, and make it low cost. So it's a fascinating time.
Another benefit to in-territory generation is that you save on transmission costs. So it goes back to our low cost.
Exactly right.
Mantra.
Yep, it does.
Being non-carbon, so it is Very
So
important.
we look at the whole business model, right? In terms of how do we improve the reliability, how do we keep the cost structure down? But you're exactly right. Transmission cost, for all the reasons that we kind of talked about before, more intermittent generation sources in the form of offshore wind, solar. There won't be any additional hydro really built in our territory, and our hydro portfolio is in very good shape. But being able to bring power from all of those new resources that are getting put in place requires more distribution systems, and that's more money. And we only pay those dollars if we're taking power from those other resources. So the motivation is not completely. We're not going to unplug from the grid. That's not the message here. But tentatively, our working target right now is by 2040, 40% of our power will be from internal generation. So 40 and 2040.
Wow. It's coming up.
It's
Seriously.
fast.
Yeah. So back to the topic of reliability, which is very important for RMLD and its customers. So how does RMLD ensure grid resilience, especially during extreme weather events? And what emergency preparedness measures does RMLD have in place?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of broaden that topic and hit a couple of these pieces here, because we're doing a few things from our infrastructure perspective that increase the reliability on a regular basis, but also harden our system. When I say harden, making it more resilient to weather, et cetera. Part of it is what we call AMI, advanced metering infrastructure. The related piece is automated meter reading systems, and so we have a mix of the two right now. But the future capabilities now are second and third generation AMI systems, and so we are literally in the process this year sending out requests for information and requests for bids and proposals for the next generation AMI system, which basically includes the metering system and the communication system between the metering on the individual buildings, as well as all that data coming back to our headquarters so we can manage and make sure we have enough energy there. And then at some point in time, we talk about the RMLD mobile app, but part of it will be also a metering system as well as built into the mobile, and that'll come into play with more EUVs. But so that's a key piece of it. As part of our increasing the capability of our distribution network, more instrumentation, I say metering, but instrumentation in terms of knowing what the pieces are, the ability to redirect. So if there's a particular fault, a limb comes down and shorts out some wires on one particular, we can isolate that and have it fed from the two different directions. All those things that we do now, but to do them faster, more concentrated. And then the other thing is just pure physical hardening, changing the way we insulated wires as opposed to open wires, and just different things so that as you have weather events, the system is less sensitive to them. And that's an ongoing process, but a good one. But there's a lot of technology today that allows us to do these things. And, as you mentioned before, we need to do it in a cost-effective way. And so part of the challenge right now is we really focus on our customer rates and more specifically what our customer bills are. And there is upward pressure from the cost of energy, which is 70% of our cost structure, and that's purely pass-through. We don't mark up any of the energy costs. We buy it as efficiently as we can, and hopefully, as we talked about before, in territory generation will generate it. And then there's the 30%, which is our operating cost, et cetera. So we're trying to be as efficient as we can at the same time while we build out our network. So we're making investments today that are going to be in place not only 5 years from now, but 20 and 25 and 30 years from now. So there's upward pressure on bills to accommodate this transition to a non-carbon world.
So you mentioned AMI, the advanced metering infrastructure, but are there other technical innovations that are helping enhance efficiency?
Yeah, so I mentioned before in the in-territory generation, low carbon solutions, and we're our goal is to continue to dramatically reduce our carbon footprint and our greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuels, particularly natural gas, is still, we're looking at as basically a bridge, an intermediate technology that combined with carbon capture to dramatically change the output. So actually capturing carbon to actually turn it into a revenue source to sell it to, the pharmaceutical industry, for example, that uses carbon dioxide as a growing medium for all the development work that they do and the growing medium that they use. They currently import it from Pennsylvania and New Jersey in 18-wheel trucks. So we think in the whole system, it would be more efficient for us to actually generate electricity that provides those pharmaceuticals, for example, and then also provide them, CO2, kind of a microcosm. There's water that comes out of these some of these systems that we're looking at that are tied to the carbon capture. Loop that back into other manufacturing processes. So a lot of integrated little microcosms of a business and technology. So there's a lot percolating in that perspective. But again, working closely with our customers and helping us all reduce the carbon footprint.
So the carbon capture technology. So is that something we are looking to do in our territory?
We're exploring that actively as we speak, and we will. If we move forward with it, it's looking very viable. It's looking viable from a technical perspective. It's looking viable from a business perspective. So if we move forward with it, we'll be one of the early adopters, and that's one of the things that we're doing at RMLD. RMLD, like every business, goes through phases. We're in the innovation phase of our business right now. So we'll be one of the first handful of utilities that are doing carbon capture in the country, realistically, if this all comes together. And it's not to necessarily be the first, but our goal is to take care of our customers and to fulfill the mission: reliable, low-cost, non-carbon. And things are happening quickly. The world is changing fast, particularly the energy space. So we're trying to find those next steps, those intermediate steps that get us to net zero non-carbon.
So we keep bringing up low-cost energy, and obviously we're exploring new technologies. So when we are exploring these technologies, how do we strike a balance between cost effectiveness and innovation to assure that we do keep our rates as low as possible for our customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And every little element, there's always trade-offs that we make. But we are very data-centric now. We do a lot of data analytics. And when I say we do data analytics, it's not just, income statements and financials and payback periods, all very, very important pieces. But the other thing that we do is, to the best of our ability, we've got much more sophisticated models in terms of load forecast. And load forecast is critical because that's what the need's going to be. And then that drives, what the infrastructure needs to be, which drives the cost structure, because we need to make sure we put the platform in place now so that it can support us for the next 20, 25, 30 years, 35 years, my apologies, or longer. And so there's a lot of data analytics that go into it, but our time horizon is 2-3 decades out. So we're making decisions in the future, where the future is clearly nobody has a crystal ball, but it goes back to really, to best of our ability, sophisticated models, not just economic models, but load models, et cetera. So and we're making trade-offs, and at the other element, where can we learn from others that might, have done stuff before us? We do not have a not invented here syndrome. We actively look to learn lessons from other people and share. Here's what we've learned with other people, because it's a challenge for all of us, but it's a fascinating challenge.
And you're regularly meeting with other utilities and discussing
the utilities, conferences, shows, vendors. Every week we've got. We're now in a position where the innovative vendors are coming to us. Hey, we want to try this out in your space. And what's nice about us is we are large enough to be in our. We're a microcosm given our mix of residential, commercial, industrial. The fact that we serve multiple towns, we've got a nice geographic area. That we're a good pilot, yeah, right. A good sandbox, so to speak, for people to try it in. We're nimble enough to move stuff, and the reason why that's beneficial for our customers is we get access to technologies that we don't have to write the check for, or at least not all of it, because our customers are looking, the vendors are looking for case studies, marketing, et cetera. So it's a win for our customers. Great question.
Yeah. So our last kind of official question. So can you give an example of an upcoming project that you are excited about for RMLD?
Yeah. So there's
just narrow it down to one if you can.
Oh, please, why just one? So probably I have a passion for this project we call Maple Meadows. And Maple Meadows, we're in the process of taking a land that is sat, I'll call it blighted property, that has, for a whole bunch of reasons, part of it's a Superfund site. Part of it is an unfinished landfill. It's not toxic in the case of the landfill side of it, but we envision it being a renewable energy park. And so it's if it would have been easy, it would have been done already. And I say that, not
tell our customers where it's located.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, Maple Meadows is in the southwest. Thank you. It's in the southwest corner of Wilmington. And it will be part of our goal to have distributed generation around our territory. But anyways, there'll be more information coming on Maple Meadows. It'll be several years in the making, but it is worth doing, and we are, as RMLD, are probably uniquely positioned to be able to see this vision in reality. And we're going to push forward to it. And at the end of the day, it will improve our reliability of our network. It will it'll put downward pressure on our cost structure, and it will be non-carbon. So it checks all three boxes. So thank you. That's a good question for our audience.
That'll be a fun day when that.
Oh yes, yeah, it will be.
Okay, so typically how we end these episodes is we answer a question from our customers.
From the mailbox.
But we've had a lot of repeated questions in the mailbox, so I thought instead we can ask a fun personal question to close here so people can learn a little more about you. So outside of your role as the general manager in the electric utility industry, what is a personal passion or hobby that brings a unique perspective or inspiration to your work at RMLD?
Great question. I've been sailing racing sailboats since I was a kid, and so one of the things that I do do a lot of summer sailing, of course, in nice weather, but we race in the wintertime too, and it's called frostbite sailing, and it's common all over New England, and for other parts of the country, other countries in the Northern Hemisphere as well. But it's Sunday afternoons from 1 to 3 where the light's still out. We do all weather, independent of the weather. We're out there unless the water's frozen over. It's about 18 of us that are out racing, and so it's competitive, right? And little sailboats, and we make sure we're safe. So, kind of lessons, right? Make sure we're safe because the water's cold. Right, we make provisions with wetsuits and life jackets and all that kind of stuff, and how the boats are set up. But I think the other element is, in terms of preparing for us, the lessons I take back to RMLD. There's the competition associated with how do we do this better, right? And we're all very good friends, but we still compete with each other. But there's the question of, hey, how can we do better?
Continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement, exactly right. And we share ideas, back to, hey, I figured this out, how to make the boat run, sail faster. So there's a lot of data sharing and information sharing. But I think the other element goes back to, the perseverance, right? And, facing challenges. Weather conditions change all the time, right? Just like for us and, on a terrestrial basis. But, how you adapt, how you adjust, how you adjust the sail, how you adjust the course. And the same thing, in our energy space, right? It's changing very quickly, and how do you remain nimble, looking ahead? So when you're racing a sailboat, you always have to look, where's the next mark, where's the next course, where's the wind shift coming? So you got to be looking ahead. So I think in the context of making sure that we do our best, that we accommodate the changes in the world around us, the changes in the environment we're sailing through. Sharing information with our competitors, but persevering through. Those are lessons that I take from frostbiting that that apply to RMLD. And, you know, it's if we didn't have fun, we wouldn't be doing it. So we have a lot of fun sailing, and as you know, right, and hopefully our audience has got a sense of those who have met us, but myself, but the whole RMLD, we enjoy the work we're doing. We think that this is a great opportunity for us to do something worthwhile for our customers.
That's great. Well, I guess that wraps it up. Thank you for letting me assume the hosting duties.
Nice.
It's fun being in the driver's seat, but thank you very much for sharing your insights.
Oh, great. So I think I'll do the final wrap-up, Julie. So that's a wrap for another episode of RMLD's Current Insights. And again, I thank you as Greg Phipps as the primary host, with Julie being the host today as well, and also our executive producer. So the two of us say thank you guys all very much for spending time with us again today.